This video is brought to you by Incogni. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. All right, this particular video comes at a bit of an inopportune time. See, the concept of them destroying your games could refer to a lot of things, especially for those engaged in the political side of gaming commentary. But for the sake of clarity here, I'm talking about publishers, and I'm also not hovering on the brink, metaphorically speaking. Publishers are, quite literally here, destroying games, rendering them unplayable for you, and thereby, in my opinion, stealing your money, while circumventing whatever laws they can in the process, or more descriptively, taking advantage of a regulatory environment where laws to protect the purchases that you make in this category don't seem to effectively be defined at all. It sounds kind of extreme to some, but it's actually a very pressing issue that rose to prominence over the past 15 or so years, give or take. There's plenty of individual examples here, but the best way to start is by showcasing the general industry transformation. Video games have undergone a colossal shift from a physical medium to a digital one. In the past, you had hardware that played the game, files contained on a physical storage device, and a subsequent experience that was effectively irrevocable, for lack of a better word. But now, the transition has been made to an almost purely digital medium, even so far as an open acknowledgement that the physical world of distribution for video games will probably die out completely. Simultaneously, the industry is also witnessing a genre shift. This part is a bit more contentious, I'd say, but the general behavior we see from major publishing companies appears to be hyperfixated on games as a service instead of games as a product, which exacerbates the problem of requiring constant internet connections or otherwise forcing dependence on the publisher directly instead of allowing agency over the product that you purchased for yourself. They explicitly do not want to sell you something and subsequently allow you to control it. They would rather sell temporary access to something and then make unilateral decisions about the future of that service with zero accountability. See, it used to be if you purchased a video game, you had that game until you made a mistake and broke the hardware, like literally and physically. In some ways, that's inconvenient, yes, and modern digital systems allow you to access accounts from any device through login credentials, thereby increasing your relative convenience while doing so. But in other ways, it provided security, because the thing you had ownership of really couldn't be discretionarily revoked by a third-party publisher. Nowadays, that's no longer true. And like I said earlier, there's a ton of individual examples to choose from, but I'll just pick a few that I have personal experience with. Before continuing on, today's video is made possible by Incogni, which is an online privacy and data protection service. Every day, without fail, your data is being sold by third-party brokers or frequently accessed without your knowledge in data breaches. A recent example would be Facebook literally selling your message history to Netflix. Some people don't care about this. They should care, in my opinion. But this lack of data protection often facilitates identity theft or other cybercrime. And for anyone who wants to prevent that kind of thing, Incogni can help. Your personal information is everywhere, not just in the archives of companies you know about, but other data firms as well, who then sell it all across the internet. For everyday users, it's effectively an impossible task to stop that in any capacity because there are hundreds of these data brokers, and it's a nearly insurmountable obstacle to contact them, fight objections, and get anything actually removed. However, Incogni does all of this for you quickly and easily. I've used it myself, it works, I've seen the results, and therefore I can sincerely recommend it. The process is relatively simple. Sign up for the website, give them specific legal permission to work on your behalf, and let them know the information that they'll be having removed. After that, sit back and let them work. Aggregation of the service lets them streamline the process because most people as individuals can't really do anything and don't have the time or ability to make a difference. Using the link down below in the description and code Echelon at checkout, you'll get 60% off an annual subscription to Incogni. There's a lot more I could say. The services they offer and the value they provide is exceptionally worthwhile, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it at that. Again, link down below and promo code Echelon for 60% off your subscription. Big thank you to Incogni for sponsoring the channel. First up is an example that most contemporary gamers will probably be aware of, and that's Warzone. Call of Duty Warzone is a household name at this point, but one of the more disruptive moments in the game's history was when Activision completely shut down the original Warzone experience in favor of its sequel. Now, for some, that's inconsequential, but the key factor we need to consider is that when doing this, they also revoked access to a very, very large number of in-game purchases that many players had made, rendering them not just useless, but completely gone. Some people were upset, others weren't, but the idea of purchasing something you want to use and then having it be rendered completely useless by the issuing company at any point in the future that they arbitrarily choose with no communication to you about it if they don't want to, well, it starts to feel kind of strange. Let's move on to Evolve. Evolve was an asymmetrical PvP experience where hunters would take down a monster, and from my perspective, it was kind of an interesting game. However, in 2023, published on the 2K support website, it was announced that Evolve would be taken offline permanently. The servers would be shut down, and the thing that people spent their money on would cease to function properly. Sure, certain components of the game would still function, but after a very long back and forth with the fan community, 2K would now be destroying the ability for players to engage with each other, even on peer-to-peer servers, which had previously been supported, marking the removal of a product function that people had paid for simply because the company decided we don't want to deal with this anymore. How about another one? The Cycle. This one hits close to home because I actually liked this game. I played it, I reviewed it, but come to find out in September of 2023, they killed it. Steam is actually full of reviews where people are lamenting the fact that it's gone, and sure, it was technically free to play as an experience, but they had microtransaction bundles from $10 all the way up to $100, and everything you purchased is now entirely useless, regardless of what it was or how much it cost. I can go a little bit more rapid fire here, but the examples of what I'm talking about are everywhere. EA shuts down games in literal batches, like Bad Company 2, Dead Space 2, and Crysis 3. Indie games, such as Spellbreak, for example, that were gobbled up by the Epic Game Store have their servers officially shut down. Thankfully, the developers created a standalone version where players can host their own servers for that one, which is great. You'd love to see that. But even more extreme, companies like Warner Brothers will delist over a dozen games under the Adult Swim banner in this case, while deliberately refusing to transfer those games back to the developers in order to keep them active and playable. Warner Brothers just doesn't care about the games, or the playability, or preservation in general, and they're taking advantage of a regulatory environment where there are no protections for any of these things. They can just render content unplayable and obsolete on a whim with no recourse. As if that weren't enough, or to really drive home the existence of a general shift here, PlayStation took a fairly unprecedented step recently where they revoked the digital access license for a demo of Stellar Blade. The details here are a bit complicated, but the gist of it is this. Stellar Blade released a demo to the PlayStation Store early, presumably by mistake in this case. People obviously downloaded the file very quickly, but then Sony revoked everyone's access, causing the game to become unplayable for anyone even connected to PSN, which even booted some people out of the demo mid-session. That's called a kill switch. And yes, it's a demo, it's not a paid product in particular, but the point I'm trying to illustrate is that there is a consistently evolving shift across the majority of the video game industry, where the things that you play are not products anymore. You do not own them, and they can be either shut down, revoked, or transformed at the sole discretion of a publisher without warning, rendering the product unplayable or any amount of content you spent money on completely void. That is a disturbing prospect to me, and it simply did not happen a couple decades ago. One more example, which then becomes the jumping off point for what can you do to stop it, because the fantastic part of this video is that there are a set of actions that you can take thanks to a dedicated YouTuber named Ross who runs a channel called Accursed Farms. The Crew. That's the catalyst here, because in late 2023, Ubisoft announced that they would be shutting down the game. Here's the issue though. The Crew is actually a very large, very successful game, or it was over the span of its lifetime, which means there's a lot of people who own it, a lot of people who played it, and a lot of people who enjoyed it. That's a perfect storm, because Ubisoft is also headquartered in France, not the United States, which helps in terms of consumer recourse. And all things combined, it presents us with a bit of a perfect storm opportunity. I'm going to put a link down below to the video on Ross's channel. This guy is good. I would highly encourage everyone to watch that video and other content that he posts, but here's the bullet points of what matter the most. Ross worked very hard, consulted legal experts, and hunted down specific complaint portals all over the world to devise a series of actions that will give the gaming industry a very real shot at sparking some sort of intervention aimed at stopping publishers from just shutting down games. This is the most comprehensive effort I've ever seen on the topic. He's got a very well laid out website called stopkillinggames.com with 2 G's between killing and games, which is also linked down below, importantly. And he's done all the legwork needed for viewers to help as quickly and conveniently as possible. It is very easy to take action right now. It mostly consists of petitions and complaints, which are outlined perfectly on the website, and I won't explain all the gory details right now. He's already done that very thoroughly, but the main point here is that when discussing this topic, it's typically a very defeatist mentality. Normally, the criticism of gaming industry trends, which I myself am guilty of, is just criticism, zero action. But thanks to Ross, we have an actual shot at making a difference right now, so this is no longer a simple display of hollow criticism, it's a call to action. Video games are shifting to a purely digital medium, but with that, in conjunction with certain trends like live service games, always online servers, etc., With that, they are increasingly vulnerable when it comes to planned or deliberate obsolescence. Games are no longer being made as products. They are often being made deliberately as services. But these companies are intentionally operating in a retail consumer gray area of sorts by allowing everyone to keep thinking it's a product and leaning into that idea as hard as they can, still, while completely ignoring even the most basic concept of preservation, even so far as to make it impossible to preserve some games, where the community is openly willing to shoulder that burden themselves if even given the option. What makes all this even more fitting is that this trend, where ownership of games is quickly evaporating completely, is an area where Ubisoft Director of Subscriptions Philip Tremblay said, quote, "One of the things we see is that gamers are used to, a little bit like DVD, having and owning their games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's been deleted. You don't lose what you've built in the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game," end quote. That is just, quite frankly, baffling to me, because Ubisoft is a company that absolutely embraces the concept of deleting content and progress, evidenced quite clearly by their full-scale shutdown of a game that had 12 million copies sold, and yet the industry has become so complacent during this shift, they seem to think that no one could ever fight back. Well, once again offering high praise here to Ross at Accursed Farms, now you can. More and more games are shutting down constantly, and typically that's a result of poor performance. But the underlying logic of it all is that gaming companies want to maximize profits, which means that any always online game that runs afoul of that particular initiative can just get chopped. Companies don't want to spend even minimal resources to ensure continuity of access to products that they themselves are selling, and I think it's time they're held accountable for these practices and forced. Doesn't matter what they want to do, they should be forced to do it with no choice, to offer preservation tools of some kind, or clearly articulate timelines of deletion before selling a product, or some form of accountability here. I don't think it's a very controversial thing to say that you should not have to buy something and wonder, gosh, I don't know, when's it going to stop working forever? I mean, I like playing it, and it's been advertised as a live service, which insinuates perpetuity, or at the very least a long time frame, but I wonder if they'll just delete it all after a year or two, because it's not convenient anymore for them to support, and I'll lose the game as well as everything I spent money on inside it. You should not have to wonder that. And the fact that these companies have skirted any sort of accountability on this topic for so long is kind of baffling. Anyway, the point here is to say that the video game industry very deliberately deletes content it sold you for full price without warning, without clarity, and without regret. Up till now, there's been very little recourse available, but thanks to the efforts of some dedicated enthusiasts and primarily a high-quality YouTuber, now there is. We should all seize that opportunity and help as much as we can, because opportunities like that are not exactly common. Again, links down below for taking legitimate action. High praise to Ross at Accursed Farms for making all of that possible. Other links as well to support the channel. The video sponsor, Incogni, of course. We have actual merchandise now after all these years. A whole spring collection that'll be gone in like a day or two, actually. So it's about to disappear. Check that out while you can. Again, link down below. As well as other things, locals and Patreon monthly subscriptions. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything. And have a nice night.